Harlem, New York, September 1935, 1:12 a.m. The backroom door clicks shut. Outside, a saxophone bleeds through the walls of a jazz club on Lenox Avenue. Inside, the air is thick with smoke and silence. 4 men sit at a table beneath a single hanging bulb, the kind of table where wars get settled or started. This was supposed to be the meeting that stopped the bleeding. A quiet agreement, a handshake, a way to keep Harlem's money flowing without bodies turning up in alleys or names hitting the morning papers. But somebody leaked it. The time, the room, the names. And now, standing in the corner with his back to the wall, one man is watching. Not talking, not moving, just watching. A glass clinks. Someone clears his throat, and in the span of 10 seconds, he sees it. One tiny detail, one wrong word, one man who thought he was smart enough to play both sides. The room doesn't explode. There's no shouting, no threats, just a single sentence that lands like a gavel. To understand what happened that night, you need to understand who Bumpy Johnson was in 1935. Harlem in 1935 wasn't just a neighborhood. It was an economy, numbers running, policy games, rent parties, jazz clubs that never closed, protection that came with a handshake and a quiet understanding that certain people kept order when the law wouldn't. And at the center of it all was a man who understood something most people didn't. Power isn't about who yells the loudest. It's about who knows the most. Bumpy Johnson wasn't the biggest operator in Harlem. He wasn't the flashiest. He didn't throw money around or make speeches in the street, but he had something nobody else had. Information. He knew who owed what, who was late, who was lying, who was afraid. He knew which cop turned the other way and which one needed convincing. He knew which landlord was squeezing tenants and which shop owner was paying protection twice because he was too scared to say no. And most importantly, he knew who to trust. September 1935, Bumpy had built a network that moved money cleanly, kept violence low, and made sure the people who depended on Harlem's underground economy could eat. But here's what nobody saw coming. Somebody wanted to change that. Not with a war. Not with bodies. With leverage. Let's open the file. September 1935. Harlem is tense. The Depression is grinding people down. Legitimate work is scarce. The numbers game is one of the few ways regular people can dream about tomorrow, and the people who control the numbers control the neighborhood. Bumpy's operation is clean by Underworld standards. Payouts happen on time. Collectors don't terrorize. The system works because people trust it, but trust is fragile. Across town, another interest is rising. Money men with connections downtown. Quiet operators who don't live in Harlem but want to own it. They don't want to fight, they want a takeover. And the first step is simple. Prove that Bumpy's protection isn't as solid as people think. Prove that his circle has cracks. Some accounts suggest that the sit-down scheduled for that September night was proposed by a neutral party. Someone respected on both sides. A chance to talk terms. A way to avoid what everyone knew was coming. But Underworld law says something else, that the meeting was bait from the start, that the opposition never intended to negotiate. They intended to demonstrate control. And that's where the story turns. A woman named Vera worked the coat check at the Renaissance Ballroom, 23 years old, sending money home to her mother in Virginia. Dreamed of opening a dress shop one day. She didn't run numbers, didn't know the names, didn't want to. But she saw things, like the way certain men walked in with envelopes and left lighter, the way a bartender nodded when someone ordered ginger ale instead of whiskey, the way conversations stopped when a door opened. Vera had been working the ballroom for 2 years, and in that time she'd learned one rule. Don't ask questions. But lately, things felt different. The regular crowds were thinner. People paid faster, like they didn't want to linger. The usual laughter felt forced. One night in early September, a man she didn't recognize came through. Expensive coat, polite smile. He tipped her $1 just for hanging his hat. "Busy tonight?" he asked. "Always is," Vera said, not looking up. "Good," he said quietly. "That's good." He walked past her into the main hall, and she didn't think about it again. But here's what the file shows. That same man was seen at 3 other spots that week. A diner on 125th, a pool hall on St. Nicholas, a barbershop near the Savoy. Always polite, always tipping, always asking questions that seemed harmless. "Business good? Heard there's a meeting coming up. You hear anything about Bumpy's people?" Nobody thought twice about it, but someone was listening, and someone was taking notes. Follow the money, and you see the shape of the trap. In the summer of 1935, a series of envelopes moved through Harlem. Not loud, not public, just quiet transactions between people who thought they were being careful. A doorman at a club gets $50 to remember who walked in last Tuesday. A runner gets $75 to say which corner Bumpy's people work. A clerk at a policy bank gets $100 to mention when the next payout happens. None of it is violent. None of it is obvious. It's just business. And business, reportedly, was being conducted by a man people started calling the Recruiter. Nobody knew his real name. Some said he worked for interests downtown. Others said he was independent, selling information to the highest bidder. What's clear is this. He wasn't buying loyalty. He was buying access. One meeting at a time, one name at a time, one detail that seemed too small to matter, until you put them all together. And that's when the picture gets sharp. The Recruiter wasn't trying to destroy Bumpy's operation. He was trying to prove it could be, bypassed. That the order people trusted was just a man, and men can be worked around. Records are unclear about how many people took money that summer, but investigators later estimated at least a dozen small transactions. Most of them harmless on their own, but one of them wasn't, and that's where the story turns. Here's how the opposition saw it. Bumpy Johnson controlled Harlem because people believed he was untouchable. That he saw everything, that crossing him meant consequences. But belief is just a story, and stories can be rewritten. The plan was elegant. Don't fight him. Don't challenge him publicly. Don't give him a reason to respond with force. Instead, show the streets that his information network has holes. That his people can be bought, that a secret meeting, the kind that's supposed to be airtight, can be compromised before it even starts. Do that, and you don't need to beat Bumpy. You just need to make him look slow. The Recruiter's job was simple. Find the weak. Point. The person close enough to matter, but far enough to stay invisible. Someone who handles paper. Someone who hears things. Someone who's trusted but not untouchable. And then, quietly, make an offer. The first approach happened in late August. A diner on 7th Avenue. Just after midnight, a man sat alone in a back booth, flipping through a ledger. Numbers, names, payout schedules. He wasn't a collector, wasn't muscle. He was what you'd call a clerical. Someone who kept the books straight, made sure the right people got paid, tracked debts and settlements, useful, presentable, trusted with paper. The Recruiter slid into the booth across from him without asking. "You work hard," the Recruiter said. The man looked up. Didn't recognize him. "Do I know you?" "No," the Recruiter said. "But I know you." He set a folded newspaper on the table. Inside the fold, an envelope. "I'm not here to threaten you. I'm here to offer you a future." The man stared at the envelope, but didn't touch it. "I don't know what you're talking about." The Recruiter smiled. "You keep books for people who don't pay you what you're worth. You know more than most, but you're treated like you're replaceable. And maybe you are. To them." He tapped the envelope. "But not to me. I'm not interested." "I didn't ask if you were," the Recruiter said. "I'm just letting you know the door's open. When things get hard, and they will, You'll remember this conversation." He stood up, left the envelope on the table. "Think about it." The man sat there for 5 minutes after the recruiter left. Then he took the envelope. Inside was $200 and a phone number. But here's what nobody saw coming. The man wasn't the only one being watched. 3 blocks away, a bartender named Clarence saw the recruiter walk out of that diner. Clarence had been pouring drinks in Harlem for 15 years. He knew faces, he knew patterns, and he knew that when a well-dressed stranger sits down with someone who works for Bumpy, it's worth mentioning. So he mentioned it. Not loud, not official, just a quiet word to someone who passed it along. And the word reached Bumpy 2 days later. A match struck. Bumpy didn't react, didn't make a call, didn't confront anyone. He just filed it away, and kept watching. Every betrayal starts with a reason. The man in the booth wasn't a villain. He wasn't greedy or hateful or reckless. He was afraid that he'd been doing the same job for 5 years and still lived in a rented room with a broken radiator. Afraid that the people he worked for saw him as a tool, not a person. Afraid that if something went wrong, if the law came down or the operation shifted, he'd be the first one cut loose. And fear makes people rational in dangerous ways. The recruiter knew that. That's why the second approach wasn't about money. It was about respect. 2 weeks after the diner, the man got a phone call. A calm voice. Familiar cadence. "You didn't spend the money." The man froze. "How do you?" "Because you're smart," the recruiter said. "You're waiting to see if this is real. I respect that." Silence. "Here's what I need you to understand. This isn't about betraying anyone. It's about positioning yourself for what's coming. Harlem's changing. The people in charge now won't be in charge forever. And when the shift happens, the ones who saw it coming will be taken care of. What do you want?" "1 meeting," the recruiter said. "That's it. A time, a place, a list of who's there. You give me that, and you're set. No one gets hurt. No one even knows. You're just prepared." The man's hand tightened on the receiver. "And if I say no," the recruiter's voice didn't change, "then you stay where you are. Useful, replaceable, forgotten." He hung up. The man stood there, receiver still in his hand, and thought about the envelope he'd hidden under his mattress. $200. Enough to fix the radiator, pay off a debt, buy a week of breathing room. And that's where the story turns. Let's be clear about something. The man didn't wake up one day and decide to be a traitor. He woke up tired. Tired of carrying other people's weight. Tired of being the one who showed up on time, kept the numbers clean, and never got thanked for it. Tired of watching men with half his intelligence get twice the respect because they were louder or meaner or luckier. He told himself he wasn't doing anything wrong. He was just keeping his options open. Just making sure that if things went sideways, he had a way out. Just being smart. But here's the thing about lies we tell ourselves. They don't stay small. The second envelope arrived in mid-September, slipped under his door at dawn. Thicker than the first. $300 this time. And a note. "The meeting is September 22nd. I need the location and the names. Call the number when you have it." The man sat on the edge of his bed and stared at the money. He thought about his mother back in South Carolina. How she cleaned houses for white families who paid her in a day-old bread and loose change. He thought about the promises he'd made when he came north. That he'd make something of himself. That he'd send money home. That he'd be somebody. And he thought about the fact that after 5 years in Harlem, he was still nobody. A voice in his head whispered, "They don't see you. They'll never see you." But he does. He picked up the phone. But the man wasn't the only one thinking. Across Harlem, a conversation was happening in a smoky room above a pool hall. A crew member named Ellis sat across from another man, watching him carefully. Ellis had been running with Bumpy for 3 years. He wasn't the smartest or the toughest, but he had one skill that mattered. He could read people, and lately, he'd been reading something wrong. "You've been quiet," Ellis said. The man, the one with the envelopes hidden under his mattress, looked up. "Just tired." "Yeah," Ellis said slowly. "You've been tired for 2 weeks now." "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means you used to ask questions. Now you just nod and take the papers. Like you already know how this ends." The man's jaw tightened. "I'm doing my job." "Yeah," Ellis said. "That's what worries me." He leaned forward. "If something's wrong, you tell me. You don't handle it alone. You don't make moves without talking to people. You understand?" "I understand." But Ellis didn't believe him, and that doubt, quiet, unspoken, started spreading. "Let's talk about what an offer really is. It's not just money. It's not just safety. It's a story you tell yourself about who you could be." The recruiter understood that. That's why the third conversation wasn't in a diner or over a phone. It was in person, face to face. A park bench near the Harlem River, early evening, September 19th. The man showed up because he told himself he was just going to say no, going to hand back the money, going to walk away. But the recruiter was already sitting there when he arrived. Calm, patient. "You came," the recruiter said. "I came to tell you I'm out." The recruiter nodded. "That's fair. But before you go, let me ask you something. When was the last time someone asked you what you wanted?" The man hesitated. "What? Not what you're supposed to want. Not what keeps you useful. What do you want? A real answer." The man opened his mouth, closed it. The recruiter smiled. "That's what I thought. You've spent so long being invisible, you've forgotten you're allowed to want things." He pulled out a third envelope. $500. This isn't about Bumpy. It's not about sides. It's about you realizing that the people you're loyal to don't even know your name. He set the envelope on the bench. One meeting. One location. One list of names. That's it. You do that. And when this whole thing shifts, and it will, you'll be on the right side of the door. The man stared at the envelope. "And if I don't?" The recruiter's voice stayed soft. "Then you go back to your room. You keep doing the same job. You keep hoping someone notices. And in 5 years, you'll still be hoping." He stood up. "The meeting's in 3 days. You have until then." He walked away. The man sat there until the street lights came on. Then he picked up the envelope and made the call. The man gave the recruiter everything. The meeting was scheduled for September 22nd, 1:12 a.m., back room behind a jazz club on Lenox Avenue. 4 names, 4 men who controlled different pieces of Harlem's underground economy. The kind of meeting that, if it went well, could prevent a war. If it went badly, could start one. The man told himself it wasn't betrayal. He was just sharing information. Nobody was going to get hurt. It was just business. The recruiter had promised him that, and the man wanted to believe it. So he did. But here's what the man didn't know. Paper leaves a trail, not just the paper he handled. The paper around him. The phone calls that got logged by a switchboard operator who worked 2 jobs and remembered voices. The diner receipts that showed the same booth, different nights, always just after midnight. The bartender who mentioned the well-dressed stranger. The doorman who saw the man leave his building at odd hours, always looking over his shoulder. Small things, disconnected things, unless you knew how to connect them, and Bumpy Johnson knew how to connect them. By September 20th, 2 days before the meeting, Bumpy had a picture. Not complete, not certain, but enough. Enough to know that someone inside his circle was talking. Enough to know that the sit-down had been compromised before it was even confirmed, and enough to do what he did best: turn the trap around. Ellis confronted the man a second time on September 20th, a stairwell in a tenement building. Narrow. No witnesses. "You were seen," Ellis said. The man's heart stopped. "Seen where?" "You know where." "I don't know what you're talking about." Ellis stepped closer. "You think I'm stupid?" "You think he's stupid. I haven't done anything." "Then why are you acting like you did?" The man's voice cracked. "I'm just trying to survive." Ellis stared at him. "We all are. The difference is, we don't do it alone." He turned and walked down the stairs. But the damage was done. The man went back to his room and sat on the bed, staring at the envelopes. $1,000 total, more money than he'd seen in years, and a phone number he'd called 3 times. He told himself it was too late to turn back, that he'd already made the choice, that the only way forward was through. A chair scraped in the hallway outside his door. He froze. Footsteps. Then silence. He didn't sleep that night. Vera noticed the shift 2 days before the meeting. The Renaissance ballroom had been tense all week, but Saturday night felt different. The usual crowds were there, but nobody was relaxed. Conversations were clipped. Laughter felt rehearsed. A man walked past a coat check and dropped an envelope on the counter without stopping. She opened it. A $20 bill and a folded note. "Stay home Sunday night." No signature. Vera looked up, but the man was already gone. She folded the note, pocketed the 20, and kept working. But her hands shook for the rest of the shift. Because she'd been in Harlem long enough to know what that kind of message meant. Something was coming, and people were picking sides. Let's follow the receipts. September 15th. A phone call logged at 11:47 p.m. from a payphone near 7th Avenue to an unlisted number downtown. Duration: 4 minutes. September 17th. A diner receipt from the same booth where the first approach happened. 2 cups of coffee, 1 slice of pie, paid in cash. The waitress remembered the well-dressed man left a $3 tip on a 60-cent check. September 19th. A park bench near the Harlem River. No receipt, but a street sweeper working the overnight shift saw 2 men sitting there for over an hour. Talking, not arguing, just talking. September 20th. Another phone call. Same payphone, same unlisted number. Duration: 6 minutes. September 21st. A bank withdrawal, $75. The clerk noted it because the man's hands were shaking when he signed the slip. None of this proves anything on its own, but put it together and you see the shape of a decision. The question investigators later asked was this: when did Bumpy know? Some accounts suggest he knew as early as September 18th after the bartender's report and the doorman's observations lined up. Others say he didn't confirm it until September 21st, when a phone trace connected the payphone calls to a number linked to the opposition's financial network. What's clear is this: by the time the meeting was scheduled, Bumpy wasn't walking into a trap. He was setting one. And that's where the story turns. Here's what Bumpy understood that most people didn't. Information is only valuable if you know what to do with it. The opposition thought they had an advantage. They knew the meeting location. They knew the names. They thought they could walk in with leverage. But Bumpy had something better. He knew they knew, and that changes everything. On the morning of September 21st, Bumpy made a series of quiet moves. No announcements, no confrontations, just small adjustments that looked like routine. First move. He sent word to a man named Raymond. Raymond ran a newsstand on 125th Street, sold papers, cigarettes, racing forms. But his real job was listening. People talked around Raymond like he was furniture, complained about wives, bragged about bets, mentioned names they shouldn't, and Raymond remembered everything. Bumpy stopped by the newsstand at 9 a.m., bought a paper, didn't open it. "Anybody asking about me?" Bumpy said. Raymond nodded. "Man came by yesterday, wanted to know if you still did business at the Lenox spot." "What did you tell him?" "Told him I sell papers, not information." Bumpy smiled. "He believe you?" "Enough to pay me $5 for not answering." Bumpy handed Raymond a 20. "Keep listening." Second move. He visited a woman named Dorothy. Dorothy worked as a seamstress in a shop near the Savoy. Fixed suits, hemmed dresses, sewed buttons. But she also kept a ledger. Not for clothes, for debts. She knew who owed what, who was late, who was lying about being broke. And she knew that people told their tailors things they didn't tell their wives. Bumpy sat in the back of her shop while she worked. "Anybody nervous?" he asked. Dorothy didn't look up from the jacket she was mending. "Everyone's nervous. Question is why?" "I'm asking about one person specifically." She set down the needle. "The man who keeps your books?" Bumpy didn't react. "What about him?" "He came in last week, wanted a new suit. Paid in cash. New bills. That unusual." "For him?" "Yes." Bumpy nodded slowly. "He say anything?" Dorothy smiled. "Said he was expecting things to change soon, that he wanted to look the part." "What did you tell him?" "I told him a new suit doesn't make you a new man." Bumpy stood. "Thank you, Dorothy. You going to handle it?" "I'm going to let him handle himself." Third move. He called a meeting with Ellis. Not at a club, not at a diner. In an empty apartment above a barber shop. Quiet. Private. Ellis arrived at noon. Bumpy was sitting by the window looking down at the street. "You were right," Bumpy said. Ellis waited. "He's talking." "You sure?" "Sure enough." Ellis's jaw tightened. "What do you want me to do?" "Nothing," Bumpy said. "Not yet. You're just going to let him—" "I'm going to let him think he got away with it." Ellis frowned. "I don't understand." Bumpy turned from the window. "The meeting tomorrow night. It's not real." "What?" "It was never real. The whole thing is bait. I set it up to see who would bite." Ellis stared. "You knew?" "I suspected. Now I know. So what happens tomorrow?" Bumpy smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. "Tomorrow we find out what fear looks like. But here's what nobody saw coming. The man, the one with the envelopes, the one who made the calls, thought he was done. He'd given the recruiter the information. The meeting was set. All he had to do was show up, act normal, and collect the rest of his payment afterward. Simple. Clean. But on the afternoon of September 21st, something happened that changed everything. Ellis showed up at his door, unannounced, unsmiling. The man opened the door and tried to look casual. "What's up?" Ellis didn't move. "Meeting's been moved." The man's heart stopped. "What?" Bumpy changed the location. "Last-minute call. Security reasons. Where's it happening now?" Ellis watched him carefully. "I'll tell you tomorrow. Just be ready." He walked away. The man stood in the doorway, mind racing. Moved. Last minute. Security reasons. He closed the door and grabbed the phone. Dialed the number. The recruiter answered on the second ring. "What's wrong?" "The meeting's been moved." Silence. "Where?" "I don't know yet. They're not telling anyone until tomorrow. Find out. I'm trying. Don't try. Find out." The line went dead. The man sat down, hands shaking. And for the first time, he realized something. He wasn't in control anymore. He'd never been in control. He was just a piece on a board. The game was already over. Fourth move. Bumpy walked through the back room behind the jazz club on Lenox Avenue. Empty. Quiet. Just a table, 4 chairs, and a hanging bulb. He stood there for 5 minutes, looking at the space. memorizing sight lines, exit points, who would sit where. Then he left. Fifth move. He spoke to the club owner, a man named Marcus who'd been running the spot for 10 years. "Tomorrow night," Bumpy said, "I need you to do something for me. Anything. When people show up for the meeting, I need you to let them in. All of them." Marcus frowned. "All of them? Even the ones who aren't invited? You expecting trouble?" "I'm expecting proof." Sixth move. He made a call to a man who worked as a porter at a hotel downtown, a man who had access to phone records. "I need you to check something." "For me," Bumpy said. "What am I looking for?" "Calls made from a payphone on 7th Avenue, September 15th through September 21st. "That's a week." "I know. What do I get?" $50. "And a favor when you need it." The porter agreed. By 6:05 p.m. that evening, Bumpy had a list. 4 calls, all to the same unlisted number. He folded the paper and put it in his pocket. Seventh move. He visited a man named Coleman. Coleman was a photographer, worked for a few Harlem newspapers, took portraits for money, and occasionally shot pictures that never made it to print. "I need you at the club tomorrow night," Bumpy said. "What for?" "Documentation." "Of what?" "History." Coleman studied him. "This going to get me in trouble?" "Only if you show up late." Eighth move. He went home, ate dinner, read the paper, went to bed at 10 p.m., slept 6 hours. Because the one thing fear can't beat is patience. And Bumpy Johnson had been patient for a very long time. Let's talk about how a trap works. It's not about force. It's about options. You give someone a choice, a way out, a path that looks safe. And then you show them it was never real. The meeting scheduled for September 22nd, 1:12 a.m., was designed to do exactly that. Bumpy let the leak happen. He let the information travel. He let the opposition think they had control. Because the goal wasn't to stop the betrayal. It was to expose it. And exposure requires an audience. By the time the sun set on September 21st, 3 separate groups thought they knew what was going to happen. The man with the envelopes thought he'd delivered his last piece of information and could finally breathe. The recruiter thought he'd successfully compromised Bumpy's inner circle and could walk into the meeting with leverage. And Bumpy's own crew, most of them, thought they were attending a legitimate sit-down to prevent a territorial war. But here's what the file shows. None of them were right. The meeting was real. The room was real. But the purpose had changed. It wasn't about negotiation anymore. It was about demonstration. And when 1:12 a.m. arrived, everyone would see exactly what that meant. And that's where the story turns. The room erupted, not with violence, not with shouting, with understanding. The 2 neutral mediators stood up, backing away from the table. Ellis moved toward the door, blocking the exit. Coleman raised his camera. Flash. The photograph captured everything. The recruiter's face, realizing he'd been outplayed. The man with the envelopes, frozen in his chair. Bumpy Johnson standing in the center of the frame, calm as a judge. And in the corner, just visible through the doorway, Vera. Watching. She hadn't meant to be seen, hadn't meant to be part of it. But when the flash went off, she was there. A witness to the moment Harlem learned what happened when you underestimated Bumpy Johnson. The recruiter tried to salvage it. "This doesn't change anything. You still can't prove?" "I don't need to prove it," Bumpy said. "I just need people to believe it." He turned to Coleman. "You get the shot?" Coleman nodded. "Every angle." Bumpy looked back at the recruiter. "By tomorrow morning, every barber shop, diner, and street corner in Harlem will know what happened here. They'll know you tried to buy your way into my operation. They'll know you failed, and they'll know that anyone who works with you is choosing the losing side." He stepped back. "You're done." The recruiter stared at him for a long moment. Then he walked out. Nobody stopped him, because the damage was already done. The man with the envelopes didn't move. He sat at the table, staring at the phone records, the bank slip, the evidence of his own fear. "What happens to me?" he asked quietly. Bumpy looked at him. "You leave Harlem. Tonight. You don't come back. You don't talk about this. You don't write letters. You disappear. And if I don't..." Bumpy's voice didn't change. "Then people will start asking questions, and I'll let them find the answers." The man stood up slowly, looked at Ellis, at the mediators, at Coleman with his camera, at Bumpy. "I'm sorry." "No," Bumpy said. "You're not. You're scared. There's a difference." The man walked to the door, paused. "For what it's worth," he said. "I didn't want to." "I know," Bumpy said. "But you did anyway." The man walked out into the hallway, into the jazz and the smoke and the noise, and disappeared into the Harlem night. Nobody ever saw him again. Let's talk about what witnesses actually see. Not the facts, not the evidence, the feeling. By 2 a.m., word was already spreading. Vera told the coat check girl at another club. The coat check girl told a bartender. The bartender told a numbers runner. And by sunrise, Harlem knew. Bumpy Johnson had caught a rat. Not with violence, not with threats, with patience. He'd let the betrayal happen, let the information flow, let the opposition think they'd won. And then he'd close the trap so quietly, so completely, that nobody even realized they were inside until it was too late. The story spread in whispers. In barbershops, man tried to sell Bumpy out. Bumpy knew the whole time. In diners, set up a fake meeting, caught him with a phone record. On street corners, took a photograph. Got proof. Nobody knew all the details, but everyone knew enough. And the message was clear: you don't play Bumpy Johnson. Because he's already playing you. Historians later debated what actually happened in that back room. Some said Bumpy had planned the entire trap from the beginning. Others said he only figured it out in the final days and improvised the rest. What's not debated is this. After that night, the opposition's credibility in Harlem was finished. Nobody wanted to work with people who'd been exposed that publicly. Nobody wanted to be the next photograph. And that's where the story turns. The next morning, Dorothy the seamstress opened her shop at 8 a.m. By 8:15, 3 people had stopped by, not for alterations. For information. You hear what happened. Is it true? Was Bumpy really that smart? Or did he get lucky? Dorothy smiled and kept sewing. Luck is just preparation nobody noticed. By noon, the story had reached every corner of Harlem. And with it, a shift, not loud, not dramatic, just a quiet recalculation. People who'd been hedging their bets suddenly stopped. Collectors who'd been thinking about switching sides decided to stay put. And the streets, tense for weeks, finally exhaled. Inside Bumpy's operation, the mood was different. Relief, yes, but also something heavier. Ellis met with Bumpy the next afternoon in the same empty apartment above the barber shop. "People are asking questions," Ellis said. "Let them ask. They want to know if there are others. If anyone else was talking. Were there?" Ellis shook his head. "Not that I've found." "Then tell them the truth. One man made a mistake. He's gone. It's over." Ellis hesitated. "You really going to let him just walk away?" Bumpy looked at him. "He's already gone, Ellis. Whatever life he thought he was building, it's over. He'll spend the rest of his days looking over his shoulder, wondering when someone's going to remember his face. That's worse than anything I could do to him." Ellis nodded slowly. "What about trust? How do we rebuild that?" "We don't rebuild it," Bumpy said. "We earn it. Same way we always have. By showing up, by keeping our word, by making sure the people who depend on us know we see them. He stood up. Fear breaks fast, Ellis. Trust takes time. But the real reckoning happened behind closed doors. Across town, in a hotel suite overlooking Central Park, 3 men sat in silence. The recruiter stood by the window, looking out at the city. The other 2, financial backers reportedly, who'd funded the operation, sat on expensive furniture and tried to figure out what went wrong. He knew, one of them said. Obviously, the recruiter replied. How? Does it matter? Yes, the man said sharply. It matters. Because if he knew from the start, that means we never had a chance, and if he only figured it out at the end, that means we made mistakes. The recruiter turned from the window. We underestimated him. That's not an answer. It's the only answer that matters. The third man spoke up. What now? The recruiter straightened his tie. Now we move on. There are other neighborhoods, other operators, other opportunities. And Johnson stays in Harlem. We stay out. That's it? The recruiter smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. That's it? He walked to the door. Some people can't be bought, can't be threatened, can't be outplayed. You either accept that, or you waste time trying to prove otherwise. He opened the door. I'm done wasting time. He left. The 2 financial backers sat in silence. Then one of them picked up the phone, made a call, and started looking for a different city to invest in. Let's close the file. In the weeks following September 22nd, several things happened. The photograph Coleman took never appeared in any newspaper, but copies circulated, quietly, among people who needed to know. The man with the envelopes was never seen in Harlem again. Some accounts suggest he moved to Chicago, others say Philadelphia. Wherever he went, he didn't take his name with him. The recruiter stopped operating in New York entirely. By 1936, he was reportedly working in Detroit. Different game, different players, and Bumpy Johnson. He kept doing what he always did, watching, listening, connecting dots. But something had changed, not in him, in how people saw him. Before September 22nd, people respected Bumpy because he was effective. After September 22nd, they respected him because he was inevitable. You couldn't outthink him, couldn't surprise him, couldn't buy your way around him. He was always 3 moves ahead. And everyone knew it. Vera kept working the coat check at the Renaissance ballroom, but every time someone walked past her toward the back room, she remembered the flash through the photograph. The moment the room understood what power actually looked like. Not loud, not violent, just certain. Ellis stayed with Bumpy for another decade, and every time someone new joined the operation, he told them the same story, about the man who thought he could sell information, about the trap that closed so quietly nobody heard it snap, about the night Bumpy Johnson proved that fear is just unfinished intelligence. And that's where the story turns. So here's what we learned. Betrayal doesn't start with hate. It starts with fear. Fear that you're invisible, that you're replaceable, that nobody sees you working, and fear makes people rational in dangerous ways. The man who leaked that meeting wasn't evil. He was human. But being human isn't an excuse. It's a responsibility. And in Harlem in 1935, responsibility meant understanding that your choices didn't just affect you. They affected everyone who depended on the order you helped maintain. Bumpy Johnson understood that. That's why he didn't just punish betrayal. He exposed it, made it public, made it shameful, made it a lesson, because the goal was never revenge. It was deterrence, and deterrence only works when everyone knows the cost. The photograph Coleman took that night became a legend, not because of what it showed, because of what it meant. That in a world where power came from violence and money, one man built his power on something else entirely: information, timing, psychology, the ability to see what was coming before anyone else did, and the patience to let the trap close itself. That's what made Bumpy Johnson dangerous. Not that he could hurt you, that he could see you, and once he saw you, you were already finished. Here's the question I want you to think about. If you were in that room, if you'd taken the money, made the calls, leaked the meeting, what would you have done differently? Could you have seen the trap before it closed? Or was it already too late the moment you picked up that first envelope? Drop your answer below. Let's talk about it.